Can you see me?
No, I can't.
No? Okay, let's see. Give me a minute. They got see me. I don't know why. So I'm trying to do it on my phone. Oh, there we go. So they said we can hear me. Okay. All right, you can see me now, right?
Yes.
Good. Okay. All right, let's get started. My water. Okay, so last week we started our class. We covered 2 chapters, and I just kind of gave a very small introduction to the 3rd chapter. But I want to go through some housekeeping stuff that I promised last week with regard to the course, some tentative dates and that sort of stuff, just to firm up about the course. Okay, so first off, I'm going to put my see how we. Okay, what's happening here? What's happening? Okay, all right. I think we're ready to go. So I'm going to put in my email again. Okay, gnottage.biffs@gmail.com. Okay. And I mentioned last week that we'll be doing an in-class case study. This is not a graded case study, but what it does is it takes us from point 1 of completing a loan application, basically to making the decision whether to approve or to decline it. Okay, and later on you'll see how this factors in with the final exam, because you'll have a similar type of question on the final exam. But everything we do up to that point building us up towards that point. Okay, so in fact, that case study, Martin Sherry rule, is on pages 101 to 107 in your textbook. All right. Homework assignments. Homework assignments are due on Tuesdays. So, for example, you'll get a first homework assignment tonight. I will email that to you guys when class is over. So the one that I'm sending you tonight will be due Tuesday. No date later than 11:59 on Tuesday night coming. So you complete it, send it to me electronically, I do not accept any late assignments.
Good
So if
evening.
it comes, good evening, if it comes 12:01 on Wednesday, it will not be accepted, okay? Because once 12 o'clock comes, I look for all of them and I start grading them. And what is not there for me to grade at 11:59 won't get graded. The homework assignments are an easy way to build up your points towards your total final score, okay? Because total homework assignments are graded. And as I indicate there, graded scripts will be returned and discussed the Thursday. Okay, so the one I'm sending you tonight will be due Tuesday coming, and then 2 days later on Thursday, we get them back and we go over the answers. Okay, the midterm or interim exam is tentatively set for October 22nd. Okay, so that's and again, this email, this PowerPoint presentation tonight will be emailed to you, so you can still take notes as you wish, but don't try to take it verbatim. Try to, maybe in some of the dialogue you may want to take those types of notes, but this PowerPoint presentation will be emailed to you. So don't try to write down what's on the screen. All right. And so let's look at the format. As I mentioned last week about the assignments, the midterm, and the final exam. So first of all, the homework assignments, they will be true, false, multiple choice, and fill in the blanks, okay? So just very similar to your end of chapter questions, some are true and false, some are multiple choice, some are fill in the blanks, okay? The midterm or interim exam will be the same as your homework assignments, the format. True, false, multiple choice, fill in the blanks. And then the final exam, again, true, false, multiple choice, fill in the blanks, and you'll have one in-class in-class case study type question. Okay, so it'll be similar to what we go through in class. So there'll be no surprises in terms of what you need to do. So we're all gearing up towards getting our skills, our everyday skills enhanced, as well as preparing for the midterm and final exams. Okay. Again, this course has two parts: Module 1 and Module 2, which you have credit or lending operations, and Module 2 is international business operations. So we will be covering a minimum of 10 chapters of Module 1 and a minimum of 2 chapters in Module 2. Okay. Just some kind of tips for you. Your success.
Sorry, Mr. Nodding.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. Sorry. Is you're changing your screen, or what we should be looking at is the file folder, the file explorer screen?
I have my PowerPoint presentation on.
No, I can't see that.
No,
Anyone
neither
else
can I.
not see?
No, I can't see
No,
it either.
the only thing we could see is the you have a file folder screen up that's showing us banking operations course, overview and lesson, banking operations lecturer's manual, that sort of thing.
Okay, already. Okay, let me do.
With the different drives and documents. That's what we can see.
Okay. Okay, give me a second.
We can see it now.
Okay, you see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Alrighty. Okay, my apologies. Okay, so let me just kind of go through that again quickly, visually, so you can see. That's my email address. Okay. We'll have an in-class case study, Martin and Sherry rule, which is on pages 101 to 107. Okay. So as we finish different sections relating to that, because the first few chapters are kind of just laying the groundwork. So probably like about the fifth, sixth chapter, we'll begin actually looking at that in class case study, Martin and Sherry rule. Okay, and as I said, it's not graded because it's something that we're going to be doing all along, but it's going to help you in preparation for a similar type question on the final exam. Okay. Then I indicated homework assignments due Tuesdays. So you complete them, send them electronically. I don't accept late assignments. So come Wednesday morning, 12:01, I'm not accepting homework assignments for grading. Then I indicated that the midterm exam is tentatively set for October 22nd. Okay. And then I was talking about the format for the homework assignments, midterm, interim exam, and the final exam. So they're all very similar. They form a similar format. True, false, multiple choice, fill in the blanks. However, you'll note with the final exam, there's one in-class case study type question, okay? Which again will be similar to the Martin and Sherry rule, one that we're going to be doing together, okay? So, all right. And then I indicated that that the course is divided into two modules, credit operations, which is a bulk, and international business operations, which is module 2. And we'll be completing a minimum of 10 chapters of module 1 and a minimum of 2 chapters in module 2. Okay. Now your success depends on you attending classes, asking questions and participating in class discussions or activities, doing your pre-reading and rereading at, on the weekends or your free time, completing end of chapter questions, submitting your homework assignments, actually sitting the midterm or interim exam, and also sitting the final exam. So you see a special note to the bottom there. Once you do 1 through 5 above, you shouldn't have a problem with passing your midterm or your final exam. Okay. So there won't be anything on the exams that we do not cover. And pretty much if you use your homework, class assignments, end of chapter, and your midterm, when we get to that, that'll pretty much prepare you for your final exam. So, well, basically everything we're doing up until the sitting of the midterm exam will prepare you for the midterm exam. And then we add stuff which will prepare you for the final exam. So a lot of people use their graded homeworks and the end of chapter, review questions, and any in-class activities we do that are specifically related to the chapter that we are doing under review. A lot of people find out that those are sufficient to help guide them to where they need to focus. Okay, because a lot of the questions, the questions and the homeworks and the midterm and the final exam, they come from a pool of questions. And so some questions may appear in the, say, the true and false, and then another time it may appear as a multiple choice type question. Okay, so it might be reworded for multiple choice. But again, I don't think anybody will have any difficulty, whether you're involved in the financial services industry or not. This course, once you attend the classes and do like these other things, like I'm saying, no one should have any difficulty. Okay. And here's the grading, how the grading format, which will differ from what's in your book. Bearing in mind that we are now doing Zoom classes for this semester, so we have to change things a bit. Okay, and so our pace and what we cover also will be determined because we're charting new territory here doing these Zoom classes. So you see the homework and any quizzes. Quizzes are probably minimal, if any. But mainly you'll have homework assignments for that 20%. The midterm or interim exam is 30%, and the final exam comprises 50%. So that's your total 100% right there. Okay. Any questions before I go on?
I have one question. You said the midterm exam will be on the 22nd or 27th of October. I didn't catch that part.
22nd.
22nd. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Tentatively.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's why I call it a midterm / interim.
Okay.
Because it might go a little after the midterm mark. Okay. So you'll know that the 22nd is actually our 8th class, or should be our 8th class, right? So, all right. Any other questions? Okay. So last week we did a quick overview for the first few minutes of class. We talked a bit about people investing their money in various ways. One of those is by putting it in the banks. Banks then use that money to grant loans, and those loans are granted for various activities to individuals and businesses. Three of the more common ones that we are familiar with are mortgages, consumer loans, and credit cards. Sometimes things go wrong, and that's when our collections or asset recovery or whatever your financial institution calls your collection team or your recovery team. So they call different things at different organizations. Okay, so you see it'll determine based on various factors, one of which is the severity of the delinquency, also the customer, him or herself, will determine whether you use the carrot or the stick. Sometimes when delinquency gets too bad, we find that we have to use the stick, which involves sometimes Supreme Court action and us realizing on our security. So in the case of mortgages, it'll be us foreclosing on real property, and where we hold chattels against personal lendings, it'll be against those chattels, whether it's car or stock in trade for business. Okay. All right. So we talked a little bit about some words that will be used interchangeably, and I've added one or two. So the first, we'll be talking about lending, credit, loans, advances. And you recall that I said that last one, advances, is kind of like an old English term, right? You give an advance of money. And also will be used interchangeably bank, a financial institution, right? You'll find more frequently nowadays people refer to as financial institutions. Very much like how our name changed, because we were called the Bahamas Institute of Bankers. We now call it Bahamas Institute of Financial Services. Okay, so but some people still refer to the financial sector lenders as banks. Okay, but financial institutions is more commonly used nowadays. Similarly with the individuals, you have bankers, lenders, loan officers, loan manager, customer service officer, customer service rep. All, we have a lot of terminology being churned out there, but they're interchangeable, so don't get confused or frustrated if during this course and our exchange, some of them may be used interchangeably. Okay. So then like I said, we looked at chapters 1 and 2. The first chapter was how banks operate. And I mentioned that not just our commercial banks are included now to be regulated by the central bank, but also our credit unions. Then we looked a bit at how banks are set up, and we mentioned that first and foremost, banks need to be funded, and they're funded primarily through deposits, and it's from those deposits that the financial institution or banks give loans, grant loans. Okay. Then we also talked about in addition to deposits and loans, some of the other services offered internally as well as externally. And anyone care to mention any of those internal or external services that we came up with last week? Hello, can you hear me? I'm getting a buzzing.
Hello?
Yes, okay.
I can hear you now.
Yes. I was
Yeah.
saying, we talked about some services offered internally and externally last week, apart from deposits and loans. Anyone want to pipe in on some of those other services, internal and or external, that we added to our list last week?
It was foreign exchange,
Foreign
wire
exchange?
transfers,
Yes.
activities.
tellers,
Yes.
HR department,
We talked about collection center, the collections
Collection
department,
center? Sorry?
finance department. I'm
Okay.
getting a buzzing. I don't know if nobody else is.
Yeah, I'm getting a
yeah,
buzzing
I'm getting it
periodically.
too.
Yeah, I'm getting a buzzing periodically as well.
We talked about, I think, the human resource department.
Yes.
Talked about the IT department.
Yes.
We spoke on the finance department.
The litigation department. Is that is litigation department one?
Sorry, what was that last?
Is
Because I'm getting a little buzzy.
litigation department one?
Compliance
Well,
department.
some financial institutions probably have a litigation department is set up internally. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The compliance
Sorry.
is the compliance
Compliance.
department
Yes.
one.
Yes.
What about
most likely.
back office? Does that fall under?
Yes. Back office. I think last week we call that the administration operations or something like that.
Okay.
So as you can see there, internal and external services by banks, and it depends on the size of the financial institution. So the smaller it is, you'll find that some of the departments may be more centralized. So you may find someone carrying out various functions. So they may be carrying out 2 or 3 functions in one organization that may be segmented into 3 different departments or areas in another much larger organization. But generally speaking, they follow a certain pattern, because there are certain things that have to be done in the financial institution. Okay. All right, so we looked at Frugal Fred and Spendthrift Sam, and we said that you have Frugal Fred who's depositing in the bank, and we said for him that was an asset. And then we have Spendthrift Sam, who is borrowing. So his loan is a liability for him. Remember that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So for Frugal Fred, his deposit is an asset, but on the bank's balance sheet, what is it?
Liability.
Liability.
It's a liability. Very good. Correct. And for Spendthrift Sam, his loan, while it's a liability for him on the bank's balance sheet, what is it considered?
Asset.
An asset. Okay, excellent. Okay, so we mentioned that while banks taking a lot of money, banks are not allowed or have been prohibited from lending out every penny that they take in. And one of the tools used by our central bank of the Bahamas is something called reserve requirements. And we talked about there being 2 categories. We talked about there being 2 categories. The first is a primary reserve or statutory reserve. And the next one is a secondary reserve or liquid asset ratio.
Sorry, Mr. Knowledge, I can't hear anything. The sound is really bad.
Yeah, it's probably the connections because I don't know if
Okay,
it's
good. We good now.
something in the weather, so it's going to be coming and going. I think Mr.
Yeah,
Pratt
it's excellent now.
was trying to do something. Okay. But what I'll do is, if I hear it buzzing, I'll just pause and hopefully it'll clear, and then I'll resume.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So like I was saying, when the buzzing started, we have reserve requirements, and that's a tool used by the central bank to prohibit banks from using every penny that comes into them and turning it into loans, lending that money out into loans. And there are two categories. The primary reserves or statutory reserve is the first, and the second is called the secondary reserve or liquid asset ratio. Okay. And there's a note to the bottom of that screen that says that the primary reserves plus the secondary reserves equals the bank's total reserves. Okay. So your reserve requirements or your total reserves are your primary reserves and your secondary reserves. Then we looked at an example Cat Island Bank, which is actually question number 7, and in the end of chapter questions. Okay, and we went through that, and those are the numbers we came up with for the primary reserve. It's pretty much straightforward.
And starting the static again.
Yeah. Okay, so calculating the primary reserve was fairly simple, but we see that the calculated secondary reserve required several steps, and so we added the primary reserve and the secondary reserve to get our total reserve requirements for that question. Okay, and like I indicated, you won't have you won't see this type of question coming up on your midterm or final exam. Okay, this is strictly just to help you understand some of the back office functions of the bank and why the bank may hold some funds and not lend out all the money that comes in. Okay. So that was the end of that chapter, and then we went into the next chapter, which we actually started talking about what is lending or credit. Okay, so we looked at some definitions, discussed whether it was art or science, reasons why financial institutions lend and to whom they lend, the importance of KYC, know your customer, policies, and we looked at 3 key aspects of lending. Okay, understanding risk, assessing risk, and managing risk. When we talked about whether it was an art or science, we spoke about the science side of it, and we spoke about the art side of it. Okay, and then we moved on, and we said it was neither singly a science nor neither singly an art, but that is a combination of both. So it was both an art and a science because we use quantitative tools as well as we use qualitative skills. Okay, so that's kind of a summary of that. Then we said that financial institutions lend to individuals, businesses, other organizations, and governments, but we will be looking primarily at individuals and businesses in this course. And so we looked at the reasons that financial institutions would lend to businesses and individuals. And there were several reasons, and they're listed there. Then we looked at reasons individuals and businesses borrow. Our clients' needs for borrowing, whether they're individuals or whether they're businesses. Okay, and those are given there. And then we looked at the need to properly assess the risk of each borrower. Okay, and we talked to them about minimizing bad debts all the way to preventing money laundering and terrorist financing. Okay. We extracted 4 key elements of why it is important to adhere to KYC and due diligence policies. And we said it's an essential component of a financial institution's risk management and compliance practice. They contribute to the overall safety and soundness of the financial institution. They protect the integrity of the financial service sector. And also it helps us to avoid making advances where either the down payment or the collateral security or the source of repayment may be derived from unlawful activities. Okay. And then we looked at finally the three key aspects of lending: understanding risk, assessing risk, and managing risk. Okay. So tonight we will well, actually, before we do that, does everyone have their textbook now?
Yes.
I have mine.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay, for those who don't, try to follow along. We're going to go through. Let's go to page 6, the end of chapter questions, review questions, for chapter 1. We've already done number 7 last week, so we won't do that one. So everyone is at page 6, the end of chapter review question.
Yes.
Okay. Banks have many departments. 2 key areas of the banks are blank and blank.
Deposits and loans?
Deposits and loans, yes. Okay. In the bank's balance sheet, a loan is considered an what?
Asset.
Asset.
Asset. Yes. 3. A savings account is an blank for the bank on its balance sheet.
A liability.
Liability to the bank and an asset
An
to the
asset
customer.
for customer.
Exactly. Very good. Okay. Reserve requirements are set by the Central Bank of the Bahamas.
True.
True.
Okay. Banks can lend to clients against secondary reserves, but not against primary reserves.
False.
False. Okay. Primary reserves are also known as
Statutory reserve.
And secondary reserves are known as
Liquid asset ratio.
Liquid asset.
Very good. Excellent. Okay. Let's go to the end of chapter questions, page 10 for chapter 2. And all of these are short answers, but it's important, and there's a reason for that, because it's important that we grasp these fundamentals from the outset. So, why do lending institutions, for example, banks, need to properly assess the risk of each borrower?
Protect them.
You have to
Minimize
protect the
bad debt.
bank's image.
To minimize bad debt.
Minimize the bad debt. Make sure the bank is getting a profit.
To prevent money laundering and terrorist financing.
Right. So your answers are on page 8. So for question like that, which you unlikely will have on the exam in that kind of format. This amount of writing in for these type of questions, but you would want to list at least 3 items. Okay, so you'll start off. Banks need to properly assess the risk for each borrower in order to blah 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 blah. 1, 2, 3. Okay, very good. Outline the importance of adopting sound KYC policies and procedures.
Also on page 8, the importance of KYC policies and borrowing clients, the need to ensure that due diligence is carried out for the borrower just for depositors. So the adoption of effective KYC customer KYC standards is an essential part of the bank's risk management and compliance practices. Sound KYC policies and procedures, not bank's risk management and compliance. So it's right in that same area on page 8.
Yes. Okay. So, yeah. So going back to, okay, the importance of adhering to KYC and due diligence requirements. You're looking at extracting those 3 from those 4 key factors that we extracted there. You see? Okay. Okay. Very good. Imagine that you are asked to participate in the argument of whether lending is an art or a science. State the position you would take and the reason or reasons for it.
I would say
Question is about
it's
it.
both.
I was
answer the question.
I was to ask you, when it says to state a reason, can we be neutral, or you have to take a side just for argumentative purposes? Because we know that it's an art and it's a science, because both is needed. But I mean, for argumentative purposes, for this type of exercise or an exam, can we remain neutral and state for both, I guess, gambits, both ends, or do we need to pick a side and build a case on that?
Well, it's the question is really testing to see whether you realize that it is an art and a science.
Science.
You see?
So that has to be
You would
both.
have to list both.
So, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
good.
So essentially, you really have no choice but to take the position that it is an art and a science.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So what 2 elements or what elements would you put in there to make the case that is an art and a science?
Science is the quantitative, and for the art it'll be the qualitative.
Okay. Okay. All right. But in a essay kind of question that requires about 4 or 5 lines, you'll have to put a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Right. So okay. All right. I'm just saying you're not going to have this kind of question in the exam, but I'm just saying in future for any other type of any other course that you may do. Okay. List 2 reasons why borrowing is important to the following. The following types of customers. The first one is individuals, and the second is businesses.
Individuals to establish a credit relationship.
Yes.
And it's to
finance assets.
and to finance assets, yeah.
Financial large assets.
And
It
short
helps with
when
the
they come up short in
consolidation.
day-to-day the expenses.
Okay. So when we talk about to meet shortfall and day-to-day expenses, what was one of the tools that I said might be used?
Line of credit,
Overdraft.
Specifically the
personal
overdraft. Yeah. Line of credit, but specifically the overdraft.
Overdraft.
Okay. Yeah. So on page 8, it'll be any two of I think there are like 5 or so. There's several there. So it says there's 2 reasons. So you give 2 reasons of any 2 reasons of those listed. Now for businesses,
And the funnel project or
Purchase of inventory.
Expansions.
something like
right?
that.
To fund a project or expansion, yes.
Purchase of inventory.
Yes, to purchase inventory because they may not be able to obtain credit from suppliers. Yes, okay. So again, page 8, any 2 of those, several that are listed there. All right. So, okay, so let's go to chapter 3, types of customers. Some of this again might be a refresher for some of you, and this may be new to some of you. Others of you who may not be involved in lending or have gone through these types of studies. You may have gone through some other types of studies. Okay, so the types of business customers are the sole proprietor, the partnership, the corporation, and the company. And there are slight differences between the corporation and the company. And that depends on jurisdiction, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But generally speaking, corporations you'll find are larger than companies. They have a little more complex shareholder or ownership structure, and they have a little bit more complex management structure. Companies generally tend to be smaller. In terms of their size and their stretch, okay, they tend more to be local as opposed to corporations that might have an international arm. The ownership may be maybe family or it's limited in its ownership. Okay, 2 examples that come to my mind locally. So for a corporation would be like Cable Bahamas, and for a company, I would say like Kelly's.
Chamba,
Okay,
Kelly's.
Kelly's, John Bull, yeah. Because those companies are pretty much owned, family business owned. They're not publicly traded. Is another
Okay.
aspect sometimes to consider. So the ownership is rather small, whereas with Cable Bahamas,
Got plenty shares.
it has plenty shareholders. It has some
So like a
international.
hotel would be
Sorry.
example. Hotels will be like a better example.
Probably you'll probably classify the hotel in the terms of a corporation, yes. Okay. But
Okay.
a lot of them have a lot of them have international linkages, and a lot of them are complex. Even though they may
Okay.
not be publicly traded. Okay, because Bahama is not locally traded. It's not on BISEX. All right. So, alrighty. So let's look at the sole proprietor in a little bit more detail. As a type of business, it's usually a one-man or one-woman business operation, and you may see it says, for example, let's say Glenn Nottage trading as ABC Shoe Company. Okay.
Okay.
So my business license would be in my personal name, but I'm just trading as ABC Shoe Company, right? So a lot of them are local businesses. In America and elsewhere, they refer to them as the mom and pop shops. Okay, your neighborhood shops and that type of thing. Okay. So also with a sole trader is that he or she will suffer all losses or all benefits or benefits from profits. So if the business goes bust, 100% of that on their shoulders. If the business does well, they benefit 100% from the profits. Okay. Normally, they have limited access to capital. You have some of them who've been around a little while and they may have access, but generally speaking, you'll find a sole trader has limited access to capital, being able to access funds either for inventory or for expansion or whatever their requirements are for their business. Any loan facility granted to the sole trader must be in his or her personal name. Legally, although this doesn't happen in the Bahamas, the business ceases to exist in the event of the sole trader's death. Okay, but you'll find it in the Bahamas that a lot of our small mom and pop operations don't skip a beat, and that's because they tend to have children or somebody else kind of like in the wings who can just take over. And so while they getting the probate and everything done if the person died with a will, or if they died in that state, getting that all sorted out, they may still continue running the business. Now some operations will stop when you have, like, say, the siblings fighting over, or the spouse and the children fighting over the property, whatever it is. So somebody will close down the shop, or it'll end up stop operating. But that's a secondary cause. The primary cause for the sole proprietors to cease should be upon the death of the individual. Okay, but like I said, in the Bahamas, very rarely does that happen if there's somebody who's understudied the proprietor, or who's prepared to just take over and keep it running, keep the business going. Okay. Let's see. Okay. There's limited management resources in most cases, and that's because in the sole proprietorship, it's basically all that the man or the woman who owns the business, they know, unless he or she confers with friends who also have businesses. Maybe they might be a part of the Chamber of Commerce, or they may just go on social media, Google information, and get some information to make their business run more efficiently, more better, whatever it is. But generally speaking, the sole proprietor has limited management resources. Okay, and that's primarily because it's just them. Okay, and then finally, he or she is personally liable for any and all claims that might arise as a result of the business. So if a supplier sues them, they can't look to somebody else because it's just them. They have to pay the bill. If someone falls down in the store and gets injured, they can be sued, and the people can come after their the business and their personal assets. So if they have real estate, a house or other businesses or apartments or whatever it is, or stock shares, they can be sued for any or all of that. Okay. So that's the sole proprietor. Oh, one thing. Let me just mention point number one. It says a man or woman trading as a business operation. Some financial institutions may have it listed as DBA. D as in dog, B as in boy, A as in apple. DBA means doing business as. So you may either see it saying trading as or doing business as. Okay, so some of you in your financial institutions may see one or the other. Okay, trading as or doing business as. All right. So partnerships. You have two or more persons. They may be trading as a business operation, but they may all, but this is a little bit different because there is some legal registry of the company's name. So if we take, I'll use the example of our two former prime ministers who had a legal partnership, a law firm partnership, which was called Christie, Ingram and Co. Okay, so you had Mr. Christie and Mr. Ingram. They had a law firm, and it was named after them. Eventually, they added a partner, Mr. Davis, Philip Brave Davis, and then when Mr. Christie became, when Mr. Ingram became prime minister, it became Christie Davis and Co. So it changed, and then at some point, Mr. Christie became prime minister, and so Mr. Davis took over, and it became Davis and Co. So we can see how partnerships can change, and I'm kind of like jumping straight to point number 3, but I'll get back to point number 2. It says a partnership ceases upon the death, resignation, or termination of any partner. Now, what you find, particularly with the law firms, is a lot of times they anticipate a partner resigning or stepping down or becoming inactive, right, in the law firm. And so what you'll find happen is that they already have the paperwork done, so that when they cease business, say tomorrow, Friday, let's say in the case of Christie, Ingram and Co. Christie, Ingram and Co. Let's say that tomorrow, Friday, was the day that they ceased business because Mr. Ingram became prime minister. You'll find out on Monday they already had all their letterheads and everything else. They already had it prepared, and the legal work done behind the scenes to change the name of the partnership from Christie, Ingram and Co. to Christie Davis and Co. So so some people say, well, those firms didn't cease to exist. Yes, they did, but they were so seamless because they anticipated what was happening, so that when they ended business on Friday and they opened business on Monday under a new name. Okay, so you find out that. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Lord. So what you're saying is that under partnerships, that's the expectation? this is one of the criteria that for future changes, things are in place.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, when a partner dies or resigns or retires, okay, and becomes inactive, that partnership ends, and a new partnership has to, if they're going to continue doing business, a new partnership has to.
I
Okay?
understand, but what I'm saying
Right.
is based on what you're saying, things that will only be in place effective next business day or next 2 business days.
Right. In that
I'm
particular
asking.
case, there was an expectation that this was going to happen, and so they put the
Okay,
stuff in place. So to
okay,
us, the public, we would say, oh, they just changed the name from Friday to Monday. But you see, a lot of the stuff preparing that for that change had already been put in place. Okay.
understand.
But it doesn't necessarily happen with every partnership. Sometimes there have been several law firms where the lawyers have split because of differences of opinion or over money or the finances of the organization, right? Or whatever reason. And so so you will call the law firm, and so while the lawyer maybe still doing business in his or her personal name, okay, you'll find that the files have been separated. So let's say I'm one partner, and then my wife was another partner, okay, and she goes and starts her own law firm. The customers who were considered in my portfolio, I take them with me, and she would take her clients with her. So then I would open up as Glenn Nordage and Associates, and she would open up as Vanell Nordage and Associates. Okay, but that might happen. It may take a week or two for that to happen, and and then you'll see them putting a notice in the paper that so and so is no longer associated with this partnership. They've set up their own office, such and such and such. Okay, but generally what happens is in a partnership, in a partnership, the partnership ends. Okay, and a similar thing happens with accounting firms, accounting partnerships. Okay, again, because a lot of times it's anticipated. Stuff will be put in place, so they can start business tomorrow, Friday, as one name and open up in a new name on Monday because they anticipated it. Okay, but the point I'm making is that the partnership actually ceases in that particular name. Okay, and you need a new partnership agreement and new legal documents, whatever is required in order to make the new partnership legal. You need to have those put in place before they can begin trading in the new partnership name. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, going back to similar benefits and disadvantages as with the sole trader or sole proprietor. What you'll find is that the partnerships, the partners can be sued in their personal capacities. So in that way, it's disadvantageous, and I think that's pretty much covered in the last point. Okay, but it's very similar to the sole trader, to the sole proprietor or sole trader. Okay, and as with the exit, either by death, resignation, or retirement of one partner, the partnership also ceases to exist with any addition of a new partner. Okay, so when a new partner comes on, you have a new partnership agreement. Okay. And as with the sole proprietor, partnerships have limited management resources, again, unless they hire skilled persons. So for example, let's take the example of a law firm. You may find that they may hire an accountant to handle the finances of the company, and follow up for or at least build a team that can follow up with clients for funds and that sort of stuff. So carry out accounting functions both for internal and also for external use. Some partnerships, and this is where the problems occur, is when those partnerships do not have a separate person dealing with the finances, like an accountant. And so you have some of them misappropriating the funds, doing what they feel like with the funds, and in several cases, it has caused partnerships, law partnerships, to fall apart and to break up. Okay, and then again, finally, individual and or
What
joint
happened, Jay?
for any and all claims that might arise. So again, it's similar to the sole trader. Creditors can come after any one of the individual partners, or they could come after both partners. Okay, and to them, they don't care whether or not the partnership is a 50-50 partnership, or whether the partnership is a 20-80 partnership or 60-40 partnership. Because some partnerships are not all 50-50. Some partnerships, someone may have contributed capital and or kind, say at 40%, and someone to the extent of 60% to come up with 100% contribution. Okay, when they declare their profits internally, the person who contributed 40% would get paid on the basis of 40%, and the person who got who contributed 60% would get the benefit of this based on 60% of the profits. Likewise, internally, when they're trying to settle claims or liabilities against them, the one with 60% interest would expect the one with the 40% to pay 40% and vice versa. However, when it comes to people suing them, anyone suing the partnership is not concerned about that 60-40%. So they can come after any one or both. Okay? And
Brandy, stop.
sorry, go ahead. Someone was saying something, go ahead. No? Okay. So so for example, from a banker's point of view, while we may be aware that someone has put in 60 and the other partner only put in 40%, in our documentation, we want to make sure that we have the ability to go after any one individual or both individuals. Okay, we don't want to be limited to how that partnership contribution is outlined internally for their purposes. So, for example, the person who contributed 40% may be the more wealthy, have more assets or more liquid assets that the financial institution can go after. Okay, so so as a financial institution, particularly if this is a borrowing customer, you would want any agreements with them not to be in line with their internal proportions. You want to give yourself the flexibility to go after either one or both. Okay. And then, of course, we come now to the corporation or the company, and this is pretty much a lot of people kind of avoid this, and that's why you have a lot of mom and pop shops that just, just do their trading as, because this is a very expensive structure, okay? Because not just you're setting up fees, but also the annual fees tend to be higher, etc. There's certain disclosures, financial disclosures, and those disclosures must be signed off by certified accounting firms, whereas with the smaller, like the partnerships and and especially the mom and pop shops, you can get an individual CPA to sign off for, say, the inland revenue tax purposes, and they may charge you $500 or whatever it is. Okay, but these corporations, they charge thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands of dollars for audits and that sort of stuff. Okay. The advantage, though, among the advantages is that there's more of a pool of persons from which to draw knowledge from in corporations and companies. Okay, if one owner dies, resigns, or quits, the company still goes on doing business. So there's continuity in the corporation or the company. Okay, generally there's a greater access to capital through share issues, etc. And also because companies and corporations tend to have their finances audited professionally. Financial institutions can see exactly how a company is doing, and so if it's a going concern, chances are they have a good chance of getting capital or being given loans by financial institutions. Okay, with the corporation and companies, there's limited liability. Okay, so it's limited to the assets of the company, or limited to the assets of the corporation. Okay, and that's a repeat. There's continuity. Okay, the last point is basically a duplication of point number 3. Any questions?
So may I ask, what type of corporations do we have in the Bahamas that you may know of?
When you say type of corporations, what do you mean?
Not type, like can you list a corporation in the Bahamas that we have?
Yeah, we have the Cable Bahamas types. You have, Atlantis, Bahama.
Okay.
And there are probably some others.
Okay.
But the companies tend to be they may have just as many assets, but they generally tend to be limited in terms of the ownership, the local ownership. You see?
Would AML be considered a corporation?
Pardon?
Would AML be considered a corporation?
Primarily, I would say yes.
Okay.
Because they have a complex structure.
Mm-hmm.
Where they have different arms and different companies, subsidiary companies feeding into them.
Okay.
And they also publicly traded.
Okay.
So they have a number of other shareholders. Okay? So one of the key ingredients is the number of shareholders and the complexity of its corporate structure.
Okay.
So, so in order for me I'd have to examine some of the other companies with the corporate structure is, etc. Okay. And some of that information is not forthcoming because a lot of our companies are not publicly traded, and so they're not required to make their structures known unless you go in the registry of records, the Registrar General's office, and then look to see who the beneficial owners are and all that sort of stuff, which is quite expensive.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So lending options to these three types of entities, you'll see that just about everything, well, not just everything, but everything, every type of credit facility that a sole trader wants to enter into, he or she has to do it in their personal name or the trading name, as in the case of the last three items. So term loans, overdrafts, credit cards, mortgages will have to be in the name of the sole trader. Then you see customs bonds, customs check writing facilities, and performance bonds, and we'll talk about these in the next chapter. These customs bonds, check writing, and performance bonds, we talk about them in the next chapter, I think, or later in this one. So they can take those last three either in their personal name or their trading as name or doing business as name. Okay. The partnership is very similar. Okay. In terms of having to get facilities, credit facilities or lending facilities. Again, term loans, overdrafts, credit cards, mortgages in their names. Customs bonds, credit facilities, performance bonds in their personal names or their trading as names. Okay. And then finally, the corporation. You see that they can do anything in the name of the company or the corporation's name. Okay. So term loans, overdrafts, all the way down to customs check writing facilities, letters of credits, performance bonds in the company or the corporation's name. Okay. And again, the benefit to that is that the beneficial owners, their liability is limited to the assets of that company. Okay. Now, let me just add here with companies, you may also have some companies that are holding companies. Okay. Anyone knows what a holding company is? Or a shell
No.
company? A holding or shell company?
It's not like a company.
Location. A bank that doesn't have a physical location, right? Or no?
Oh, well, take out the word bank and put a company.
Okay, a company that doesn't have a physical location.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
But the fact that it's a holding company means that it has been incorporated to just hold assets. It is not a trading company. Okay, it doesn't. It is not a business. It doesn't. So, for example, you'll find some business persons and other people who have a lot of assets, who are very wealthy. You'll find them forming these holding companies. So what they'll do is they will say ABC Holding Company, and they will take, so they buy a house or a condominium, they will put the house or the condominium complex in that holding company's name. A lot of it also is to want to hide what they own from the general public, because a lot of those holding companies, you'll find like it'll list their law firm as being, or people in their law firm, or on the law firm who's doing the legal work for them, and secretaries of those law firms, etc. As being, the secretary of the company, the president of the company, but they're not the beneficial owners of the company. Okay. So a lot of people do that to hide the assets. So for example, you'll find some men, you know, in their marriage or before they get married or when they get married, they may acquire assets and put it in a holding company name. So if there's a divorce between them and their wife, and some women do it as well, if there's a dispute, unless you know that the person has XYZ limited company, holding company, and those assets in that particular holding company name, they can't come after it. You see? So, and also if something happens, let's say someone goes on one of those properties that is in the holding company, and let's say someone slips down, falls down, hurts themselves, and they sue, they go to sue the owners of that property, well, they'll be actually suing the holding company and not the beneficial owner. So let's say, I have a condominium complex. Someone comes on the property, they slip down. I have it in ABC Holding Company name. The person who slipped down would be suing ABC Holding Company. They can't sue me because I'm not listed as the owner per se. You see, I'm hidden. Okay. Now in the registrar general's office, you have to declare who the beneficial owner is. So it is known, but that information, unless required by a court of law or some other requirement, is normally not disclosed. Okay, so the most you'll get is that, let's say for example, Graham Thompson and Co. So let's say Graham Thompson and Co. Is the registered office of ABC Holdings Company Limited, my holdings company limited. Okay, the most you'll get is that you'll have to go to Graham Thompson and Co. You have to file your papers, your suit papers. Go to Graham Thompson and Co. and say, hey, ABC Holdings Company is. It says that this is you're the registered office, so I'm delivering the summons and all that stuff to you. Okay, so with holding companies, again, financial institutions would lend to people who have holding companies, but you will also find that financial institutions will ask the beneficial owner to guarantee it in their personal name. Okay, so if I was to go to Bay Street Bank, and if I was to go to Bay Street Bank and I borrowed $250,000 to put into another business, into one of my businesses, but I'm pledging one of my properties in the name of ABC Holdings, ABC Holdings Company Limited, as collateral. So they'll take a mortgage over that particular property, okay? But they'll ask me to, sign a guarantee for $250,000 in my personal name, okay? And a bank that has a very good lawyer will also have in that mortgage agreement that not only could they go after that particular property, but under any other assets. So if I pledge a condominium complex on Paradise Island, okay, as collateral security for the mortgage, but I also own another complex out West Bay Street, okay? So even though the bank is only holding the Paradise Island property, a very well-worded mortgage document would also capture the one at West Bay Street, okay? So they'll be able to come after the one that's mortgaged to them, as well as the other ones, also in the name of ABC Holdings Company Limited. And then as well as they can then sue me in my capacity as a guarantor. Okay? Because the guarantee, again, will be in my personal name. All right? So just to kind of to give some pointers on how complex it could be when you're lending to corporations and companies, and you have to ensure that your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. Some financial institutions, they have form documents, and so they may enter into they may say, oh, these form documents already vetted by our lawyers, so to cut down on the cost of the customer, we'll execute it in-house. I personally would tend to say, unless you really have someone who's really experienced in your credit risk department, or you have a in-house legal person or legal team, then you should bounce that off your corporations, your financial institutions attorneys, because you could one little screw up and or misprint, and you can jeopardize the financial institution's position. An example of that was a guarantee, and the thing about it is this was done by two seasoned bankers. One was fairly versed with documentation, and the other one had about 30 years experience in the financial services industry. And one person was at the branch level and the other person was at the head office level. And the guarantee was completed incorrectly. Okay? And basically what ended up happening is the person who was borrowed in one holding company name, but they wanted to guarantee it not in their personal name, but in another company. They wanted another one of their companies to guarantee it. Okay? And so what ended up happening is where the borrowing company's name should have been inserted in the blank, the guarantor company's name was inserted. And then where the guarantor's signature or name should have been inserted at the end, the borrowing. So they switched where the names were. Okay? And so here you had the borrowing company actually guaranteeing a loan that was never granted to the guarantor. And so the guarantor say, I didn't borrow from you guys.
Wow.
Okay? So fortunately for the institution, the individual who did it eventually came around. Okay, I think they were looking at getting into politics, and they wanted to. They didn't want that kind of thing. You know, them being taken to the courts and being sued by the financial institution, blah blah blah. You know, whether technically they were correct or not. And so the beneficial owner of both companies decided to, from his or her personal resources, to clear up the debt. But the debt, you know, the guarantee was screwed right up. Okay, so and the borrowing company went bankrupt. The loan went into default. The borrowing holding company had no assets that could cover the loan. The guarantor company had, but then again, you had the guarantor listed as a borrower, and the borrower is the guarantor. And then, of course, you couldn't go after the beneficial owner because you allowed, instead of the guarantee to be in his name, you allow the guarantee to be in the name of one of his other holding companies. You see? So you have to be careful when you're lending to corporations and companies and other organizations. Okay, and we're going to get into some of the things that can trick you up right now with regard to those. So. Okay, so excuse me. Alrighty, so let's take a closer look at the borrowing company or the borrowing corporation. Okay. Now let me just also state here that a corporation or a registered company is considered a legal person. In law, it is considered a legal person. Okay, so they have the just like a legal so just like an individual or partners in a partnership can borrow in their names because they are individuals. A company can borrow in its individual name because it is considered a legal person, a legal entity, a legal being. Okay. So, what are some of the things that we need to be aware of when we're looking at a company or corporation who is a borrowing client of ours? So here are some of the things: articles and memorandum of association, the borrowing resolution, definitely they're borrowing, a resolution to appoint bankers, and you need that even if they when they're opening an account. Okay, you have to be cognizant of the company's seal. That's important, and also annual returns and certificates of good standing or certificates of incorporation. And I'll get into the difference between certificate of good standing and certificate of incorporation in a few minutes. But first of all, let's look at the articles and memorandum of association, because that is the articles and the memorandum. They are what they give life to a company or corporation. Okay, and the reason for that is that the memorandum and articles of association will indicate A, and if you want to follow with me on this, we're on page 12, okay? And there are five components, and what I've done is I've inserted some letters. It doesn't appear in your text. It's just one paragraph, but just above each of these, you may want to insert these letters A, B, C, D, okay? So the articles and memorandum of association will indicate A, what a company can and cannot do in law. What a company can and cannot do in law. And so that is primarily why you need to have a copy of the articles and also a copy of the memorandum of association as a banker. Okay? Whether they're opening up a deposit account and or whether they are borrowing. Okay. Secondly, B, it will also indicate if a company can borrow. Okay. Now don't assume. Now some companies, what happen is some companies, they have like these format articles and format memorandums of association. And so a lot of lawyers churn it up, they just change the name of the company. Okay? Notwithstanding that, you still need to review the articles of memorandum to ensure that if you are lending to that company, that it states in there that they can borrow. Okay? So, so first of all, what the company can and cannot do legally, and B, if it can borrow. C, how it can borrow. Okay? Can it come to a local bank? Can it raise capital by issuance of shares? Can it borrow in foreign currency? Okay? Those are some of the kind of considerations that you need to know. How it can borrow. Okay? And D, who is authorized to sign on its behalf. Okay? So the first four items, what a company can and cannot do in law, okay? If it can borrow, how it can borrow, and who is authorized to sign on its behalf. And then E, okay? This is known as the company's borrowing power, which is not to be confused with the borrowing resolution, which we're going to discuss in the next slide, okay? So the Articles and Memorandum of Association are known as the company's borrowing power. Okay. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay. So next we're going to look at the borrowing resolution. Okay. So once we've determined that that this company can borrow, and it can borrow under the guidelines of what we offer as a financial institution, okay, we need the company to authorize the borrowing. And they do that by a resolution, okay, a borrowing resolution. So we said that the Articles of Memorandum is the borrowing power, okay? But in order for them to borrow, they need to do a resolution, a borrowing resolution, okay? And a borrowing resolution is required, A, because the company is a separate legal entity, okay? B, it is governed by a board of directors, okay? And even if it's a holding company, it has at least a secretary and a president. And it has at least two officers, a president and a secretary, okay? C, therefore, in order for a company to borrow legally, a resolution has to be prepared to document that the action, that is the borrowing, has been properly authorized by the board of directors. So not only must they have the ability to borrow, okay, but the borrowing has to be authorized by the board of directors, okay? Then D, the borrowing resolution can and should include details of any collateral security to be pledged and who is authorized to sign the documents on the company's behalf, okay? So, so the borrowing resolution will say, and we can look at the next slide. Well, not the next slide, but well, maybe I'll just include that now. Okay. But the borrowing resolution should include the details of security, saying what is going to be pledged and who's authorized to sign the borrowing documents on behalf of the company. Okay, so for example, the president and the secretary may decide that they want somebody else to sign the documents. So it might be the president and somebody else, or it might be the secretary and somebody else, or it could be them, the president and the secretary themselves, who will sign. But the borrowing resolution must state who is authorized to sign the documents on behalf of the company. Okay. And then to top it off, to make sure that it's fully legal, the resolution should be under seal. Okay. And we're going to talk about that, the company seal, in the next slide or two. Okay. In fact, let me go to that slide now. Okay. Let's look at the company seal. All formal documents executed by a company must bear the seal of that company. Okay, in keeping with, first of all, normal sound banking practice. Secondly, normal sound business practice. And thirdly, the Companies Act 1992 and any subsequent amendments. Okay, and you'll see a picture of a seal. Some of you may or may not have seen that little instrument. What you do is you press that lever down, and in that circular section, it almost looks something like a, you press it down almost like you do a stapler. And then you see that little circular thing that it says your company name, seal, blah, 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 blah. What it does is it embosses in the paper the name of the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and it may also include the license number of the company. Okay, so in that inner circle you see corporate seal 2025. Okay, and of course it'll indicate Nassau, Bahamas in our instance. Okay, now some of you may also have seen those red seals like in the other picture. Okay, so sometimes those are put on the document and then the company seal is impressed on that. But in a lot of instances, the red seals may not, and it's sufficient for the imprint to be on the document itself. Okay. All right. So let me just go back now to this item: a resolution to appoint bankers. Okay. So. So excuse me, a resolution to appoint bankers is a primary document required authorizing the company to open or operate accounts with a bank or financial institution. It states the name of the bank and the type of account or accounts to be opened or operated in the company's name. So when a financial institution, when a company comes to you to open an account, they must have a resolution. This is another type of resolution, a resolution to appoint bankers. A lot of financial institutions have a standard form, their own appointment of bankers resolution type form. And so it just needs to be filled out by the companies, and they just put their seal on it. They sign and put their seal on it. Okay. Okay. Now here's another. So some of those documents that we've talked about, some will be a part of the security file for the borrowing customer. So, for example, the borrowing resolution, that will definitely be in the because you have different types of files in the bank. Some of you have what they call the daily file, the credit file, the collateral security file. Or they may call it the general file, your credit file, and your collateral security file. So your general file is where you'll have the information relating to customers who are operating deposit services type of accounts. Okay, so your checking accounts, savings accounts, term deposits, etc. Okay, So that'll basically be your general the general file or your working file. Some people call it the working file for their clients. Okay, the credit file would be what's held in the lending department for borrowing customers. Okay, and the collateral security file is held normally under dual custody, because that has legal documents in it. For example, it'll have your stuff like your borrowing resolutions, original borrowing resolutions, your original lending documents, like your chattel mortgages, your real estate mortgages, and those types of original legal borrowing items, right? But your account mandate file or your general file, your everyday working file, is something that you'll keep, and you will have in that a resolution to appoint bankers. Okay, and like I said, a lot of financial institutions, many of the financial institutions have their own standard format, which can be completed by the company. Okay, so apart from that, you will also have the signature card. Okay, which is a summary of the authorized signatories. It lists their names, positions, and any limits, any signing limits or signing authorities. Okay, it contains original signatures of signatories. So, for example, you may have four or five signatories, and it'll say to be amounts up to $1,000 to be signed by any one of the five, but the amounts over 1,000 up to 500, up to 5,000, signed by any two. And then I'll say any amounts over $5,000 signed by any two, one of whom must be the president or something like that, or the treasurer or something like that. So your signature card will summarize the authorized signatories. Okay. So when you get, for example, if you get a check come in with signatures on it, you need to check the signature card, because if it's like a check for $10,000, in the instance in the example I gave, must not just be signed by two people, but one of those two people must be the president. Okay, so you have to be aware of stuff like that. If not, you as a financial institution may lose recourse should something go wrong with the execution of that check. Okay, or the negotiation of that check. Okay. Thirdly, you also want to have a copy of the articles and memorandum of association. Okay, and it's important for the bank to view the original, and you can either certify a copy yourself as a financial institution, or you can request a certified copy from the customer. Okay. Fourthly, it should contain the current annual return and the certificate of good standing. Okay. The annual return and the certificate of good standing is obtained on an annual basis from the registrar's office. Okay. And the annual return indicates who the officers are of that company, and the certificate of good standing indicates that the company is in good standing. And sometimes, if the certificate of good standing is not ready yet, let's say, for example, they come to you in January to open an account, or to borrow, they may not have this, the new certificate of good standing. But some banks, what they will do is, if it's an existing customer, they'll ask for to see the original receipt that came from the registrar's office, indicating that the fees have been paid. Okay, because the certificate of good standing indicates that the annual business fees, required fees have been paid. Okay, so and then you take a copy of that receipt for your record, but that'll be provisional because you still want them to provide eventually the certificate of good standing. Okay. Again, be guided by your policies and procedures by your financial institution. Your financial institution may be hard and fast and say, no, we don't want a copy of the receipt. We want the actual certificate of good standing, and we're not going to allow you to open the account or do further business until we actually have the certificate of good standing, the actual certificate of good standing. Whereas some other financial institution may say, hey, for the time being, until next month or next 2 months, we'll take the receipt from the registrar's office. Okay. And then there may be some other requirements that there may be some other requirements that your financial institution may want to hold in the company's mandate file. Okay. Any questions on that before I move on?
This has been a really interesting class, I must say.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So
Go
with
ahead.
all of the information you just explained just now, will this be on the exam, or this is just something we need to know?
Well, some of the stuff that you'll find out in the end of chapter questions and the thing.
Okay.
Right? So, for example, when I talked about, let me go back here, articles and memorandum of association, right? You may have a question on what are two important points regarding the memorandum and articles of association,
Okay.
right? What do they indicate? So,
Okay.
so you'll say what a company can and cannot do in law, okay? And if a company can borrow, okay? Then a similar thing may be asked about the borrowing resolution, okay? But again, see some of the stuff that I'm putting in here is not specifically in your text, okay? And so some of this is really to enhance your understanding of the process. And so anything that enhances, that is extra, will not appear on the only from your text, right? Only would be covered from the text. Questions will actually come from the text, okay? Except when you're doing calculations or whatever, because those will change because names and figures will change, okay? So, but I will put my head on the chopping block. You have nothing to be concerned about when it comes to the questions. Because like I said, end of chapter, homework assignments, you're gonna find them coming up in one way or the other. If it's true and false now, it may come up fill in the blank, or it may come up as multiple choice. So so don't let that concern you or cause your blood pressure to go up. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So if no other questions on that specifically, let's look at some of the annual requirements, at least two of the annual requirements. And this is where I will talk a little bit more about the certificate of incorporation and how it differs from the certificate of good standing. That'll be the second point. But as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the annual return indicates the authorized officers of the company along with some other stuff. Okay, they'll say what they, their shareholdings are in the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, the certificate of good standing indicates that the company remains on the registry books in good standing. Okay, and you'll see from the second part of that, if the new certificate is not ready, a copy of the registry receipt may be obtained conditionally upon receipt of the certificate. And I've explained that previously. Now, the difference with the certificate of good standing and the certificate of incorporation is that you need a certificate of incorporation. Well, let me put it this way. The certificate of incorporation does exactly that. It certifies that a company or corporation has been incorporated. And that happens in year one. Okay? So you'll only have a certificate of incorporation once. And that's when the company is incorporated. Okay? So the following year, the company will need a certificate of good standing. And any subsequent years, they will need certificates of good standing. Is that clear as water or clear as mud?
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud.
Clear as water.
That's clear.
Okay, let me see if I get it at least clear it up to so it's clear as apple juice.
No, you were good. You were good. That's
Okay.
clear.
Okay, good. All right. So that takes care of those two. And then you'll notice that both, or you should note that both of them are issued by the registrar's office, as I previously said. Okay. So that ends that chapter. Okay. And again, I'll ask if there are any questions before I move on. Okay, so no questions on that. All righty, so let's go to page 14, the review questions. Okay, page 14. Everyone is there? Page 14, those of you who have books?
Yeah.
Your text? Okay. So the question is, a sole proprietor or trader is a type or form of business in which the owner is personally liable for any and all debts of the business. True or false?
True.
True.
That's true. Okay, so the sole proprietor is liable for all and any debts. Okay. In a partnership, question number 2. In a partnership, only the richest partner has liability for any and all claims that might arise.
False.
False. Okay, that's correct. 3, a blank is a type or form of business in which the business still goes on in the event of the owner's death.
Corporation.
A corporation or limited company, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
You can put in corporation or limited company. Okay. Question number 4. For a borrowing company, the bank should obtain a copy of the company's latest annual return from the Registrar General's office, together with a current certificate of good standing. If a new company, that is one in business for less than 1 year, or it is a startup holding company, then a certificate of incorporation should be obtained. Certificates of good standing are issued only to going concerns. True or false?
A certificate of good standing are issued to ongoing. False.
To going concerns. A going concern means it's an ongoing business. It's doing well.
I got a loss there because we said the certificate of incorporation has been given within the first year, and the good standing is every year thereafter annually.
Right.
But what lost me was the bank should obtain a copy of the company's latest annual return from the Registrar's General Office.
Okay, for a borrowing company, the bank should obtain a copy of the company's latest annual return, okay, together with a certificate of good standing. Is that true?
Yes, because you need a certificate of good standing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's look at the second one now. If it is a new company or a startup holding company, then a certificate of incorporation should be obtained.
Yes, so that's true.
That's true.
That's
So
true.
That's
both
true.
statements are true. So it means that this is true. Okay. Now, when you come to true and
Yeah.
false question, if one statement is true and one statement is false, then the whole thing is false. Okay.
And that's why I was a little taken back when it said to obtain a copy of the company's latest annual return.
Yes,
That's
because you have
why.
to, for a borrowing company, you should obtain a copy of the bank's latest annual return.
No, but when it says from the Registrar's General Office, that took me for a loophole there.
Oh, well, that's where you obtain it from.
Okay, yeah, that because I didn't know. So now you're educating me, but that's why I was a little,
Okay.
on the fence whether it was false.
Okay. Alrighty. But like I said, if both are true, it's true. If one is true and one statement is false, where you have a true and false, it has two parts. If one is true and one is false, then the whole thing is false. Okay. I just want to say that up front in case you come across a question like that. Okay. Alrighty. Question 5. What is the relevance of a company's articles and memorandum of association to the lender? Now, before you answer, someone asked a question about this, and then I went back and I said, you may need to do like A and B, etc. Okay, so that's kind of like almost giving away the answer. So, what is the relevance of a company's articles and memorandum of association to the lender?
It tells the lender how the company is what word am I looking for?
What the company
What
can
all
do
rules?
legally.
What all the company can
What the
do.
company can and cannot do by law. It indicates what a company can and cannot do by law.
So first of all, this is what the company can and cannot do by law or in law. Okay.
Yes.
It states it can borrow, how it can borrow, who is authorized to sign, okay, and it's regarded as the company's borrowing power. Okay.
Yeah.
When a business seeks to question number 6, when a borrower seeks to borrow from a financial institution, why is a borrowing resolution required?
Shows if the company can or cannot borrow.
It is governed by a board of directors.
Okay, so first of all, they're not a
Companies
legal,
itself, legal entity.
they're not an individual, right? So a borrower resolution is required because the company is a separate legal entity. Okay,
Oh.
so we have to look at the legal aspect of it first. Okay, because it's a separate legal entity. Okay, and it's by board of directors. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's look at types of. Let's go to page 15. Okay. Types of lending or credit products. for those persons who don't have the book, the text yet, see if you can get it before next class, well before next class, tomorrow or Monday if possible. Okay. There's something I want to add under the features and benefits of the first product. Okay, so on the screen you see overdraft revolving credit line, and then you see, if you notice in your book, you have the first three: convenience, flexibility, interest based on usage. And then you have a lot of space there, right? Underneath that. So add that fourth point, revolving access to funds.
Okay.
And add that for both the business product and the personal product, okay? Personal meaning the individual.
Sorry, Mr. Knowledge, you said revolving access to funds, add that underneath.
Yeah, just the what's in blue. In blue,
Okay.
yeah. Because that I don't think that's in your books.
No, it's not there in the book.
Right. So that's a fourth point, revolving access to funds. Okay. And if you haven't written it yet, don't be too concerned. Like I said, this presentation will be sent to you, and you can compare the notes and you can add it. Like I said, it's in blue, blue lettering, so you'll be able to see that it's different from what you have in your. Okay. But the first, we can see the different types of products. So let's look at the different types of products. Okay, I don't have them all on the screen. And the reason for that is that if I included all of them on the screen, you may not have been able to read what I wanted you to add. So the two that are missing are two letter of credit and check guarantee. But we have, for business products, we have overdraft or revolving line of credit or credit line. We have a corporate credit card. We have business loans. We have a commercial mortgage. And two that I said we're missing off this, but it should be in your books. There's a letter of credit and the check guarantee. Okay. And then on the individual or personal product, we have overdraft, revolving line of credit. The second one is a personal credit card. The third is the term or consumer loan, or some banks refer to them as personal loans. And then you have your mortgage loan for those four for the individuals. Okay. So overdrafts, for the benefit of those of you who may not be in banking, or who may not have never been exposed to an overdraft facility. But an overdraft is a lending facility. And so what happens is normally it's attached to a checking account, or sometimes people refer to it as a current account. Okay. You should not have an overdraft on a savings account. Although some banks allow savings accounts to go overdrawn, where they charge their fees, and they, so for example, if the usage fees for that month, you don't have sufficient funds, let's say the customer has $2 balance on the account, and you need $10, they'll still puts through the $10 and overdraw the account, $8. That's not an overdraft. Okay, that's an overdrawn account, and really that should not be happening on savings accounts. So if your organization is doing that, they really shouldn't be doing it. But you know, we do all kinds of things nowadays that we never used to do in the past. But overdraft facilities are attached to checking accounts. Okay, and so for example, let's say an individual, in this instance of business, let's say a business needs a $5,000 overdraft facility. And in this instance, they need the overdraft facility because, as it says in the previous one of the previous chapters, to close the gap between accounts receivables and accounts payables. So sometimes what happens is that businesses may not have credit facilities or credit with a supplier, okay, or their credit with a supplier may be up at its maximum, and so they need to purchase additional stock for their business. And so what happens is they have customers who purchase on credit, and this is why some businesses say they only do cash. You know, they'll put up a sign, "Don't ask for credit." You know, they have a little thing showing credit laying off of the casket, saying credit is dead. Okay, because you may sell X amount of goods, but you may sell it on credit. So if you sell it on credit, you don't know when your customers are going to pay you. You expect them within the next 30 or so days or less to pay you. But before that money comes in, you need $5,000 to do something else with. Okay, and you don't have it on your account, or you may only have $1,000, but you need 5,000. So so you've determined that along with your financial, the customers determined along with you, the financial institution, that they need a $5,000 overdraft because they'll never need more than $5,000 anytime for over that course of doing business for that year. Okay, so you give them a $5,000 overdraft. They have $1,000 in their account, and they need $5,000 worth of stuff. So what they'll do is they'll overdraw the account either by making a withdrawal, or using their debit card, or writing a check to the supplier for $5,000. Okay, the result of that is they will overdraw the account by $4,000 because they need 5,000, so they've taken 5,000 of the account, but they already have 1,000. Okay, so they only need to use 4,000. They only need to use 4,000 of your $5,000 facility. Okay, so that means that they may be overdrawn $4,000 now, but they still have the ability to get another $1,000 because the overdraft is for $5,000. Okay. Now let's say before the end of the month, someone comes and they pay $3,000. Okay, so you deposit that to your checking account. Okay, so now what that does is that reduces that $3,000 reduces the overdraft from $4,000 to $1,000. Okay, because you've credited the account for $3,000, and you were overdrawn $1,000. Okay, and then the next day you need some more money. Okay, so you need another $1,000. So then you now overdraw it by is now overdrawn $2,000, and that goes on. So the overdraft fluctuates up and down for the month. So as you get in your sales, you deposit your sales, whether it's daily or weekly, you deposit it to the account. It takes overdraw overdrawn balance down. Hopefully by the end of the month, the account is in credit. You would want to try to put your account in credit at least, or I should say the client should endeavor to try to put their account in credit at least once for the month. Okay. Sometimes it doesn't happen again because of trade. Sometimes the payables for the company exceed the receivables. People are not paying as quickly as the company needs to acquire, to purchase inventory, to do business. Okay. But hopefully at the end of the day, in a 12-month period, the customer would have made a profit, and then of course then you would reassess to see whether or not they still need the 5,000, or they need to increase it or decrease it, or whether they need it at all. Okay, so an overdraft facility is supposed to fluctuate. Okay, it's not supposed to remain static. I was at a financial institution where we had to write off a lot of hardcore overdrafts because when we contacted the people, well, some of them we could never have contacted. When we contacted the people, they never realized that they had to pay the overdraft back. They figured once they draw down the $1,000 or whatever it is overdraft facility they got, that was it. They didn't have to deposit that money back to the account. So the overdraft became hardcore. We eventually had to collect, and when we couldn't collect, we had to end up writing off. Okay. So overdrafts provide convenience because you don't have to keep coming back to the bank to keep borrowing. And that's where the revolving access to funds comes in. It gives flexibility to the client. Again, they can just simply, write a check up to the amount that they need, provided they do not exceed the overdraft limit. You only pay the interest based on what you use. Okay, for an overdraft facility. Okay. And as I said, it's a revolving access to funds, which is very important. And we have to stress that to our clients, that it's a revolving credit. It's very similar to how a credit card should operate. Okay, you draw down the credit card and you expect you should pay off the credit card before the month end. But of course, most people in the world, especially in the Bahamas, do not pay off or cannot afford to pay off their credit cards. So they at least pay the minimum. And once they pay that minimum, then they'll see an increase in the available balance. Okay, so I'll say available balance, it'll go up by some amount minus whatever the interest charge may have been for the month. Okay, so an overdraft facility operates similar, in a similar fashion as that of a credit card. Okay. Now you see there it says overdraft / revolving credit line. There's a slight difference between the overdraft and the revolving credit line, in that a credit line sometimes tends to be larger and tends to be secured by an asset. But the key aspect of a credit line is that you can be charged interest, that there are 2 tiers of interest being charged. Okay, so whereas an overdraft, you are only charge interest on what you use, with the credit line, you can be charged both on the interest on the amounts that you use, but also interest on the amount that you don't use.
Okay.
Okay, so for example, let's say someone with a $10,000 overdraft facility, if they only use, and it's been determined that, hey, I need a $10,000 facility. Okay, so their business their business requires a $10,000 facility, and they come to you and they say they need it, and you have done your assessment, and your assessment say yes, 10,000 is adequate. Okay, but let's say in 1 month they only use 2,000 of that facility. Okay, normally the interest on the amount used is higher than the interest on the amount not used. Okay, so for example, in this example, they've used 2,000. Okay, so you may charge them interest of 12% on the 2,000. Okay, whereas on the portion that they didn't use, you may charge them 3%. Okay, so in this way, the bank gets 2% on the 2,000, and it gets 3% on the 8,000 unused. Okay,
And that's credit line.
that's the credit line. So that's the basic difference between the overdraft and the revolving credit line. Okay, so there's basically a penalty for not using all the funds on the credit line.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Now we only got a few more minutes, so let me kind of go through these, and we'll have to finish this chapter next week. So of course, there's a corporate credit card, which is short-term financing. It's interest-free if you pay the bill in full before the due date. It offers some security, and now we have all these other enhanced features with our credit cards. It gives us convenience. Okay, you don't have to carry around lots of cash or traveler's checks. You know, you use your card, swipe it, blah blah blah. And it's an easy expense reconciliation tool because you can see what you've charged and you can see what you've credited to the account. Okay, so what you've paid down on the account and what you've charged against the account, and any returned items. So it's a nice reconciliation tool, an accounting tool for business or an individual. Okay, so so as I go through these, you'll see that for these first four, they're very similar for both the business and the individual. Okay, you'll see the features and benefits are similar. Okay, so the business loan, you have installment payments, you have clear payment terms, and you have a fixed interest rate. Okay, the same thing with your term and consumer loans for the individual. Commercial mortgages give you longer repayment terms than your regular business loan. They tend to have lower interest rates, and that's because it's secured usually by real estate. Okay, and you can accumulate equity over time. Similar thing for the personal or the individual lender, borrower who is getting a mortgage. Okay, so so as you pay down on the mortgaged real estate, you get you pay down your debt against it, and you build up equity in it. Okay, so your equity is the item that you have less which you owe the bank. Okay, so simply explain, that's what equity is. Okay, so if you have a property in let's say property in Golden Gates, and that's worth $100,000. This is just the land, $100,000 for that property in Golden Gates. But you have a mortgage outstanding $180,000. Your equity is the $100,000 less the $80,000 that you owe. So your equity is $20,000. When you pay down, let's say you pay down $10,000. So that goes from $80,000 to $70,000. Then it means your equity increases by 10,000. So you move from 20,000 down to 30,000, and so on, so on, so forth, until you pay it off altogether, and then your equity would be equal what the property is valued or worth. Okay. Equity also accumulates if the area in which that real estate is increasing in value over time. So, so you can get equity because you've paid down your debt, as well as you can get equity because of appreciation of land value. Okay, so for example, let's say someone owned a property before they announced the Bahama project on West Bay Street. That property may have worth $250,000. As soon as they announced and they started doing work for Bahama, the properties went up to say $350,000. Okay, because of the improvements of development in the area. Okay, so there are two ways that you can get equity: either by reducing your debt on the real estate, or because of property appreciation on the item mortgaged. Okay. Any questions on that before I look at the last two types of items for business products? No? Okay.
No.
So the last two that's available for businesses, but not for individuals, are letters of credit. Okay. And we will come across this again. Letters of credit, we'll come across this again later on in module 2 when we talk about international business on page 97. There's a letter of credit, documentary credit diagram, or a simple diagram on page 97. And then I think on page 98, there's a more complex diagram. Okay, so, but a letter of credit facilitates international trade. For a business who wants to do imports with a foreign business, it provides collateral for the beneficiary, that is the foreign person who's supplying, the foreign supplier. Okay, it provides them with safety, and it guarantees payment to the suppliers or the exporters. Okay, and then you will see, those of you who have your books, have your textbooks, you'll see it says it is regulated by the ICC publication 500. Okay, and then there's an asterisk. So right to the bottom of the chart, there's an asterisk that explains it. ICC is the International Chamber of Commerce International Standards relating to format. And all that simply means is that whether it is a standard format, whatever jurisdiction you're in, whatever language, whatever territory. So for example, a letter of credit in France will be pretty much set up the same way as a letter of credit in the Bahamas, in the UK, in Canada, America, Switzerland, and so much so that even if you don't speak the language, because it follows a certain format, a specified format, you'll be able to as a banker, to be able to get, because it'll say, who the beneficiary is, the amount, purpose, and that type of thing. And those beneficiaries will be, the names will be spelled out in English that you understand. It'll be in currency that you can understand, whether it's US funds, B dollars, sterling pounds, or whatever. It's similar. Some of you may have done wire transfers, or be in the wire transfer department. The wire transfers are the forms are set up similar as well. They have International Chamber of Commerce standards as well, international standards as well, so that even if it's in a foreign language, and you don't have anybody who can interpret it, and you really need to action it, it is not difficult to follow. Okay, so that's all that means, right? And then, of course, check guarantees. It says the bank guarantees payments of checks to a major supplier. And the most common instances in which these are used are for the Customs Department and our Treasury Department. Okay, and I'm going to end that there. We'll talk, we'll finish this chapter next week. This and the other chapter next week, and then we'll begin chapter 5 and 6. Okay. So those who don't have the textbook, get the textbook and catch up on your reading. Those of you who read it, this is an opportunity to reread this chapter and attempt the questions at the end of chapter questions as much as you can on this chapter. Okay. What else? And I will be forwarding the first homework assignment later on tonight, which will be due on Tuesday. Okay. Any questions?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No.
Alrighty. Well, I bid all good night. Have a good night. Safe day tomorrow. Productive day tomorrow, and a restful and productive weekend as you continue your studies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Much knowledge. Good evening,
Good
everyone.
night.
Night.
Good evening. Girl, that's in it.